At 6:01 p.m., rain stitched silver lines across Portland's West Hills, while a chandelier hummed above a table no one had touched. 8 candles waited beside cupcakes that sagged at the edges, sugar crowns sweating under damp air. Balloons bumped the ceiling like lost thoughts. In her wheelchair, Lily Harper sat straight, chin lifted, eyes on the door, as if her gaze could pull friends from the storm. Daniel Harper stood behind her, tie loosened, hands useless, listening to a house that breathed like a museum after hours. The invitation list had been perfect. The driveway was empty. He checked his phone. Another apology pinged, then silence. The wet cedar smell drifted in from the courtyard, mixing with distant traffic and the faint hiss of the gas fireplace. Somewhere far below, the Willamette pushed against pilings and old secrets. The knock came soft, to then one. Daniel opened the door to a thin boy with rain in his dark curls and a jacket bleached by time. Water clung to his lashes. His sneakers had surrendered long ago. "I'm Mateo Cruz," he said, voice steady despite the cold. "Can I join you?" Lily's fingers tightened on her chair's arm. Daniel's security lights picked out the boy's outline and the tremor in his hands. Mateo glanced past Daniel, met Lily's gaze, and smiled like he recognized a story he had been told to finish. From his pocket, he drew nothing yet, just pressed his palm to the fabric, as if guarding a secret that could tip the night. Daniel saw the outline, small, oval, metal, its chain coiled like a question mark. He knew that shape. Lily did too. Her breath caught. "Where did you get that?" Daniel asked. Mateo swallowed, then nodded toward the empty table. "If I tell you, everything changes." Daniel Harper lived above the city in a West Hills mansion that glowed like a lighthouse whenever rain washed Portland clean. Glass balustrades, heated walnut floors, a terraced garden carved into basalt, and a kitchen built for caterers spoke about money before he did. Drivers rotated cars under the port coker. Assistants managed calendars with color-coded blocks, and a private chef prepared meals Lily could enjoy without struggling to cut. Downstairs, a den held a telescope pointed at a sky that rarely cooperated. At the same time, the office showcased awards from industry groups that thanked Harper Biotech for growth, efficiency, and relentless execution. Executives described him as decisive. Analysts called him disciplined. Shareholders voted him indispensable. He wore those labels like a uniform even when he walked past Lily's room at night and heard the tiny clicks of her wheelchair brakes settling. Grief kept exact time. His wife's death a year earlier had hollowed the house, and the car crash that followed had carved a hard perimeter around every routine. Lily's spinal injury lived in the language of doctors' thoracic fusion, nerve damage, occupational therapy, but for Daniel, it meant ramps at home, transfer boards in the car, and the soft curse he swallowed each time he misjudged a threshold. He built a gym with parallel bars and hired an angelic physical therapist who coaxed movement from muscles that obeyed only on good days. The birthday that no one attended reopened everything he had tried to seal, and the boy at the door gave the emptiness a human outline. At the office the next morning, rain smeared the skyline into graphite. Daniel stepped from his elevator into a lobby, smelling of espresso and wet wool. A receptionist greeted him. A compliance director waited with binders. Screens along the corridor displayed trial milestones and market projections, bright as runway. Lights. Harper Biotech occupied 3 floors in a tower with a view of the Willamette and bridges drawn like equations. Fremont in a clean arch, steel with trusses, Broadway lifting red geometry into the cloud. Labs on the lower level ran assays through the night. Above them, a war room tracked burn rates and regulatory calendars. Investors wanted a spectacular quarter. Advocacy groups asked about access. Daniel moved between those demands with a careful gait that looked like grace from a distance and exhaustion from up close. He delegated decisions, yet kept the lines that mattered in his own hands, the way a climber keeps hold of the rope even when a partner seems secure. Every hallway reminded him why the company existed. Every email reminded him how easily its mission could be bent toward comfort or speed. Outside, Portland kept breathing. TriMet buses sighed along Burnside. Cyclists flicked water from spokes under a pewter sky. In Hawthorne, chalkboards listed flights from independent roasters and baristas. Rinsed pitchers under a hiss that sounded like cats. Fog slid over Mount Tabor during early hours and pooled near the river by noon, coating bridges in a glaze that made steel look soft. The cedar smell after rainfall threaded alleys, playgrounds, and church steps. Daniel drove home that evening, past Powell's Books, its orange signs warm against drizzle, and through Old Town where neon looked tired by comparison with the clouds. He turned onto a road that wound toward his gate, thinking only of a quiet dinner and sleep. Lily met him in the foyer, wearing a sweatshirt with galaxies printed across the front, cheeks brighter than they had been for weeks. On the coffee table lay a folded star map cut from a library handout. A boy had penciled notes along the rim, marking windows of visibility between storms. Mateo Cruz had returned after school with a courtesy that surprised staff who were used to couriers and consultants. He had asked if Lily liked science. She had said yes, then no, then yes again, because some answers were complicated now. They set up the telescope despite the weather. They darkened the den, drew curtains, and decided to look anyway. Daniel watched from the doorway and tried to track. What made this visitor different from pitying neighbors or clients who brought glossy boxers? Poverty could turn charm into performance. Yet Mateo's attention settled without calculation. He measured the room the way a careful nurse studies a bed rail and a carpet seam. He crouched to make eye contact at Lily's height, and when he said her name, he gave it time, as if names should not be rushed. His jacket was thin, his sneakers were tired, his questions were good. Where do the stars go on cloudy nights? Who decides which constellation owns a square of sky? Why do maps call our galaxy a bar when it is a spiral? Lily answered with guesses and laughter and the pure relief of not discussing medicine. Daniel felt skepticism coil in his chest anyway. He had learned to test for angles. Later, he asked the boy about home. Mateo described a Laurent apartment near the Willamette, a walk-up with a stairwell that rattled, a coin laundry that ate quarters, and a corner market under their window that sold bruised fruit cheaply at closing time. He lived with his grandmother, Rosa, who worked nights at a clinic and told stories over soup because television made her sleepy. From their kitchen, they could hear freight horns and gulls. On summer days, the wind smelled like hot metal. In winter, the river's breath came straight through the frame of their only good window. They owned a small shelf of library cast-offs and a cardboard box filled with craft supplies rescued from a school bin. They kept a plant on the sill because Rosa claimed green things cut sorrow. Daniel pictured the building and knew exactly which blocks could match that description. He thought about his pantry, full of imported oil and chocolates wrapped in gold paper, and felt something inside him tilt. Portland's neighborhoods framed that tilt in color. Alberta's murals bled through mist, divisions served steam from food carts, Selwood's porches held wind chimes that sang above wet sidewalks. Forest Park dripped with moss, bright Ev limes. Every corner held a version of care if someone looked long enough. Have you ever noticed someone lonely in your community? The sentence rose in Daniel's mind, uninvited, when he tucked Lily into bed and found glitter stuck to his sleeve from the paper map. On Thursday, he suggested a short trip to a small park that overlooked the river. A driver secured Lily's chair and followed a route that threaded bridges and streetcar tracks. Rain came thin at first, then steadier. They parked near a stand of willows whose leaves shivered like coins. Mateo unfolded a blanket across a bench and showed Lily how to angle the chair so that the wheels wouldn't sink. He had figured that out by sight, not by accident. They stayed until darkness crushed the sky flat. Back at the house, he sat with a spreadsheet and failed to focus. He saw the glare of a boardroom, the long table where people discussed penny pusher guidance while lives trembled offstage. He saw Lily's hands moving, not freely, yet moving. He saw Mateo listening, a kind of listening that looked like work. Initial suspicion did not vanish. It changed shape each day he witnessed small proof. No wish lists appeared. No hints about shoes or phones. Only questions about whether Lily could reach the eyepiece by herself if the tripod lowered to notches. Daniel adjusted the telescope and watched her smile hard enough to wear him out. He began to ask himself what curiosity felt like when it stopped pretending to be risk management. The answer sounded a lot like purpose. On Sunday, clouds cracked for an hour after dinner. The terrace stones were slick. The air tasted like copper. Somewhere in the trees, a barred owl worked through its notes. A wind combed the cedar grove, and the scent walked straight into the room. Mateo nudged the tripod, then stepped back so Lily could claim the discovery. Vega blinked into being, a pin in velvet. Lily named it, then named Deneb, then found Altair trembling lower down. A triangle drew itself and held. She laughed, with a sound Daniel had not heard since before the crash. He froze, stunned by a joy that made his ribs hurt in a new way. He considered the way wealth rearranges problems without erasing them. He considered a boy who treated his daughter not as a project, not as a pity case, but as a partner under a cloudy sky. The thought climbed into his chest and refused to leave. By the time he reached the office again, Daniel understood that skepticism had not protected him from grief. It had only narrowed the path where hope could walk. Mateo's steady kindness widened it by inches, and Lily noticed every inch. Mateo Cruz began arriving after school with a backpack that jingled because coins and paper clips knocked together in a side pocket. Small prizes rescued from vending machines and library trays. Lily Harper waited near the tall window where rain braided Portland's gray light into a moving curtain, her chair angled so she could catch the driveway before the security feed flashed. Whenever the gate opened, she lifted a hand like a captain greeting a late ship. Matteo stepped inside with a bright hello and a practiced pause, giving Lily time to answer. He unpacked glow stickers, a thrifted flashlight with a pale blue halo, and a dog-eared field guide lined with pencil notes from someone who loved margins. They turned off the chandelier and taped paper constellations across the ceiling, building a sky inside a mansion that had forgotten warmth. With curtains shut, he swept the beam over walls, while Lily called out names: Lyra, Cygnus, Aquila, on angles, distances, and stories. Daniel Harper stood in the doorway at first, hands in his pockets, trying not to break routines therapists had trained into muscle memory. He watched Lily's shoulders ease when the boy spoke, watched her breath settle into the rhythm of a homemade planetarium. Questions filled the room like birds at dusk. Do shadows travel faster than stories? Do maps hide mistakes? Are comets rocks with ambition? Matteo never made a joke at her expense. He listened with unhurried attention, offered ideas, and let silence land without embarrassment. Daniel's chest loosened a notch. Guardrails built from months of fear felt less necessary while those two invented a universe using tape and patience. Outside, bike lanes shone under drizzle, and riders in ponchos slipped past cafes where grinders rasped like friendly saws. On Saturday, Daniel suggested a small field trip to a neighborhood park with a hill that cleared when the clouds behaved. The driver secured the chair and took Burnside, counting bridges like beads, while the rain shifted from polite mist to sloppy curtains. Douglas firs threw off droplets like dogs after a swim. Under a shelter, Matteo spread a vinyl cloth and scanned the ground for a spot where wheels wouldn't sink. The clouds slid open for 10 minutes, enough for a stubborn pin of light to ignite. Lily grinned at the refusal, and Daniel hid his smile behind a thermos. Something in Daniel rose to meet that image. Monday pressed its weight onto his inbox. At Harper Biotech, a finance VP circulated a proposal to reduce spending on a rare disease program that had missed 2 key milestones and impacted a quarter's outlook. The board chair forwarded a tidy directive: consolidate, pivot, show nearer, wins. Daniel stared at the line where ethics met guidance and felt the plank narrowing. He knew how to write the memo that would please markets and calm analysts. He also knew families who sent updates from waiting rooms, pictures captioned with percentages and prayers. During a review call, he kept seeing Lily beam a borrowed light across the ceiling and a boy sheltering hope beneath a frayed jacket. He proposed a compromise to buy breathing room, trim marketing on a legacy drug, preserve bench teams, and accelerate a grant to an academic lab with promising mouse data. Pushback arrived fast, polite, relentless. He postponed the vote, closed his laptop, and stepped into rain that stitched the streets into silver ribbons. By late afternoon, Matteo sat cross-legged on the rug, teaching Lily how to build a spinning star projector from a cereal box, a pushpin, and a rubber band. She took over with a seriousness that made Daniel's pulse thump the way it did when surgeons delivered good news. The device worked. Pinpricks scattered across the ceiling, and they named what they could, invented stories for the rest. Lily asked what Matteo liked most about the night. He answered honestly, the bargaining the way clouds sometimes listened if you asked kindly. Trust arrived through ordinary acts. Wheels checked, scarf dried, homework encouraged, and kitchen tidied. Without asking. Mateo left on time so Lily could sleep, and texted Daniel if a bus went off schedule. Boundaries held. Kindness never felt theatrical. Daniel told security the boy had open access during certain hours, and staff adjusted around that new gravity. In quiet minutes, he caught himself memorizing expressions he wanted to keep. Lily counting seconds between thunder and flash, lips moving. Mateo waiting for her to finish, eyes bright with patience. Watching was no longer enough. He wanted to participate. On a rare sunbreak, they tried Mount Tabor. The park smelled like pumice and sap. Daniel pushed, while Mateo scouted slopes, whispering tricks volunteers had taught him when he helped neighbors carry carts up cracked stairs. They reached an overlook where the city spread under a pewter lid. Cyclists coasted by with jackets, flapping, bells chiming politely, and a trumpet student-shaped, distant air. Lily asked for the names of every hill. Mateo listed them, stumbled on one, laughed, corrected himself, then traced the line where fog slid down toward neighborhoods. They ate sandwiches under a maple that dripped on crusts and called it seasoning. Daniel let messages stack unanswered, promising himself he would handle fallout later. That night, he drafted a note to leadership about the threatened research. The language tried for honesty without panic, maintain momentum, explore partnerships, hunt efficiency without sabotage. He sent it, then requested a face-to-face with the board chair away from tidy decks and call queues. Beneath strategy, something quieter shifted. Lily's posture improved, hands steadied, attention lengthened, and her voice returned to its natural pitch whenever joy outran strain. Daniel changed. Mornings stopped feeling like trenches. Evenings held more than vigilance. On Thursday, he found Lily and Mateo tracing constellations on clear plastic and taping overlays to the telescope to simulate movement. The boy had printed labels at school and sliced the edges with a borrowed paper trimmer. They planned a planetarium show for Rosa when she could visit. Daniel offered popcorn. The house smelled like chocolate and cedar smoke from the fire pit. And beyond the terrace, the garden glowed dark and glossy, while an owl worked through a stubborn pattern of notes. During homework hour, Mateo admitted that he had missed a quiz question by mixing up aphelion and perihelion. Lily turned the mistake into a game where each wrong answer required a ridiculous dance. Daniel performed one, accepted defeat, then won a rematch. Victory sounded less like conquest and more like celebration. The weather settled back into familiar habits. On division, baristas wrote names on cups and slid mugs across counters while rain strummed windows. Streetlights smeared halos along the asphalt in that chorus of ordinary beauty. A decision became clear. He would stop treating the program as a bargaining chip and start treating it like a promise. The magnitude of that shift frightened him, yet fear finally had good company. Lily had coaxed courage out of hiding by sharing it with someone who knew how to carry delicate things. Mateo kept showing up, and with every visit, the house remembered how to be a home in Portland tonight. Pressure settled around Daniel Harper, the way fog nests beneath Oregon's bridges, soft yet relentless. In the tower above the Willamette, glass turned to gray mirrors, while a finance vice president advanced slides, glowing like runway lights, trajectories, burn curves, benchmarks posed as destiny. The plan spoke clearly about efficiencies, then demanded a pivot move funding from the rare disease effort into a faster oncology push. A director quoted an activist fund and promised applause if Harper Biotech trimmed what would not pay this year. Another said, compassion appears on cost lines, not revenue. Daniel saw in the window not only a chief executive, but a father who had watched monitors tick while surgeons whispered. He argued the program served families without lobbyists, that data showed momentum, and that the purpose is a map. The chair asked for numbers, not metaphors. He refused to nod, not loudly, not yet. He requested a week, claimed diligence, demanded patience when lives ride the margins, and suggested trimming non-critical marketing for a legacy line to shield the bench. Eyebrows rose. The activist representative tapped a pen, a metronome counting dollars surrendered per minute. Fog smudged the Broadway trusses until the span looked tentative. He felt alone and strangely awake, like a swimmer who spots the river's cold truth and dives anyway. He left with a promise to refine scenarios and return with more than caution. That night, the city wore rain like a shawl. Streetlights smeared halos across slick pavement. Cyclists ghosted along protected lanes, and cafe windows steamed while baristas rinsed pitchers with a hiss-like breath under pressure. He parked by the kitchen entrance and found Lily Harper at the dining table with Mateo Cruz beside her, both elbow-deep in a patchwork of rescued paper, grocery bags, bus transfers, flyers, a cereal box panel, a crumpled menu and brown parcel. Wrap, glue sticks, and blunt scissors sat between pencils sharpened to sensible points. The chandelier dimmed to a honeyed circle around their work. "We're building the sky we can carry," Mateo said, eyes bright. Not performing for praise, but absorbed in the audacity of making order from scraps. He penciled the Willamette as a silver thread down the center so constellations could anchor to something familiar. Lily labeled bridges in careful block letters: St. John's, Fremont, Broadway, Steel. Hawthorne then dotted stars where they might be on a clear night if the clouds stepped aside. Mateo told stories while he cut, letting sentences settle like feathers. He spoke about his grandmother, Rosa, a former nurse who had learned to read tenderness faster than pulse. At the clinic, Rosa sat beside people who could not wait for perfect systems. She kept gauze in her pocket and a notebook in her apron. A hand on a forearm, she believed, calmed panic better than instructions. Care began with listening. Names deserved to be spoken whole. Dignity was not a luxury. When supplies ran low, she improvised clean shirts, boiled water, borrowed blankets. Kindness, she said, is a clinical skill, measurable in breath that steadies. Mateo paused and smiled at Lily. He asked where she wanted the North Star and waited while she considered. They pressed the cereal box into a circle to set a compass rose, then stitched lines from Vega to Deneb to Altair with cotton thread so she could feel the geometry. Daniel watched from the doorway until watching felt small, then sat, trimmed edges, and smoothed glue with his palm. Wet cedar drifted from the terrace. Chocolate lingered from a forgotten batch of cookies. There, voices braided easily. Then a question landed like a moth on the rim of his cup. When was the last time you listened to someone's story? The sentence hovered between steam and silence. Daniel pictured the board's tidy arguments and realized he had listened for risk more than meaning. He had measured every narrative by its ability to defend guidance, not by its capacity to hold. A life? He wrote Rosa in the corner and underlined it. Lily sketched a tiny heart beside the name and grinned without apology. Outside, mist braided through the bridges and softened their iron. A streetcar sighed over the lower deck. A barge nosed through rain like a patient thought. They worked until the clock slipped past 9. Mateo wrote notes on scraps and slid them into a pocket taped to the map's Edgemouth's fax. A memory of a night bus crossing Hawthorne while lightning stitched a far hill. Lily practiced constellation names that taste like music. Daniel cut a strip from parcel wrap to frame the map and found steadiness in doing something that improved beauty without demanding applause. He asked how Rosa handled days when nothing went right. Mateo said she brewed tea, cleaned the counter, and chose a task small enough to finish, because completion teaches the heart it can try again. The phone on the counter buzzed with another email about consolidation. He faced the screen, then turned the phone over. Purpose no longer felt like a slogan. It felt like a practice built from small, accurate acts. He saw how the threatened program could be held the same way, shielded from noise by stewardship, partnerships, and humble tilings. He pictured reallocating sponsorships into grants, shrinking glitz to protect the lab, and inviting a regional hospital network to share development risk. He would not sell it as charity, but as a strategy traced over ethics, the way a thread traces triangles across the paper sky. He brewed cocoa because the chef had gone home, and because the act steadied his hands. The mugs fogged their faces. Mateo thanked him with the practiced gratitude of someone who notices cost and care. He asked for a box to carry the star map on the bus. Daniel offered a ride. Mateo declined, citing Rosa's rule about finishing what you start, which tonight meant testing the map under a streetlight. The refusal wasn't pride. It was a boundary, clear and calm. Respect settled where suspicion used to sit. Upstairs, after Lily slept, he opened the deck no one had titled with the word cut. He inserted a slide that reframed the program as the company's compass, then outlined reductions that pinched comfortable corners, postponed a vanity remodel, and trimmed conference spectacle. He detailed partnerships with a university lab and a hospital consortium willing to share risk and data. He wrote that investors deserve excellence with a memory, not speed without conscience. He saved the file under a name that made him smile, North Star. Before bed, he checked the driveway camera. Mateo moved through the mist with the box hugged to his chest, the map's faint glow leaking like a small lighthouse. By the river, train horns stitched the night, and bridges held their quiet poses over water that keeps promises by moving. Daniel knew he had not merely watched kindness, he had been taught by it. Purpose was not a slogan. It was the patient craft. From scraps, while rain wrote its own story, he turned off the lamp, paused by Lily's doorway, heard a steady, peaceful breath, and felt the paper sky rustle in the vent's soft current. He whispered a promise and stepped into a hallway newly sized for hope for tomorrow. Rain stitched the afternoon into narrow silver threads as food carts hissed under awnings and bicycle bells pinged along the Hawthorne approach. Daniel Harper, parked near a cluster of steam and neon, tightened his coat, and followed Mateo Cruz through shallow puddles that mirrored signs for pho, tacos, and espresso. The boy carried a folded grocery bag that clicked softly with each step. "Rosa's cooking," he said, then added, "But first, we show you something." Mateo's building sat above a bodega stacked with pears under a blue tarp and a handwritten offer half off at closing, if you ask kindly. Inside, the stairwell rattled, detergent sweetened the air, very gently. Rosa Cruz met them at the landing, a calm presence in an apron, gray hair braided, eyes quick with the practiced reading of pain and pride. "Welcome," she said, "shoes by the mat. We keep the floor friendly for wheels." The living room held thrift chairs. A plant bowed toward a cracked window, a table set with bowls, and a short bookcase of discarded medical texts, annotated in a careful hand. Mateo opened the bag and laid a cloth-wrapped journal on the table. Leather worn to a tea color, corners softened by years. "I found this under the bed," he said. "It was my grandfather's. He took notes after shifts at the clinic and wrote ideas for cheaper tools." Daniel felt the tilt of possibility before he lifted the cover. The first pages showed a hand-powered centrifuge built from a bicycle rim. Then a microfluidic cartridge that pushed a panel by capillary flow. Then a recipe for a thermostable reagent warmed by a small exothermic pouch. Margins mixed English and Spanish, prices circled in red where costs fell under a goal. Names of field nurses appeared beside measurements, and stars marked trials that met both accuracy and price. Rosa poured tea and watched Daniel read. "He wasn't titled," she said. "Porter, then tech, then janitor. When budgets thinned, when devices failed, he asked why replacements had to be imported. When supplies ran out, he improvised and logged what worked." Lily traced a diagram lightly, careful not to smudge the pencil. "Could this help your company?" she asked. Daniel pictured a pilot line validation, the regulatory grind, and the families who might finally see a clinic deliver answers without expensive theater. "If these designs stand," he said, "they could change how we deliver certain assets. Cost fewer fragile parts, smaller power needs. It could mean reliable testing in vans, school gyms, and rural rooms." Rosa nodded. "Tools should kneel to people," she said. The kettle clicked off. Steam carrying cinnamon drifted across the table. Daniel found a section titled Equitable Scale, a ledger of materials with substitutions from hardware stores, a list of simple jigs, and photos taped in with pale corners. At the bottom, in Rosa's square script, "Keep this safe." "May I take it to scan?" he asked. Rosa shook her head. "The paper stays," she said. "You can copy it here or return tomorrow with care." He accepted the boundary. They ate soup bright with cumin and lime while the journal rested between bowls like a shy guest. After dinner, Mateo angled a desk lamp low and spread pages across the table. Daniel photographed each diagram with patient care, while Lily named files and grouped them by function. Rosa sat near the window, darning a sleeve and humming under her breath. "What did he want this work to become?" Daniel asked when the last page lay flat. Rosa set the needle down. "Affordable, reliable, shareable," she said. "Profit can live with conscience if someone holds the line on the drive back." Bridges rose from mist like ribs guarding a heart. Daniel stopped at a coffee shop where lamps glowed amber, and the air smelled of citrus peel and dark roast. The barista wrote his name. Heat crept into his hands. He heard the board chair again show nearer winds. He also saw Lily grinning over a cereal box star map, and heard Mateo explain how a corner can teach liquid to behave, which loyalty mattered, defending a quarter, or serving the reason medicine exists. He opened his laptop and titled a note, "Bridges We Choose." He listed steps: reproduce the cartridge with a university lab, validate repeatability, model cost curves conservatively, draft a licensing structure that honors source material, propose a pilot with a regional hospital network, shield the bench by trimming marketing and conference spectacle. He wrote to the general counsel about intellectual property rooted in community notebooks and asked for a path that protects without erasing origin. In the window, he barely recognized the man staring back. The outline looked the same, yet the gaze had shifted from control to stewardship. At home, he printed the photographs and arranged them on his desk in a steady grid, circles around 3 designs that could move from drawing to device with modest cash and a stubborn team. He imagined a nurse in a mobile unit reading results, while a generator coughed and rain worried the roof. He imagined a briefing where he said the company would anchor its reputation in access, not spectacle. He returned the next evening with a compact scanner and a small gift-fresh fruit from the bodega and a bouquet Lily chose. Rosa let him set up. "You handle paper like it can bruise," she said. "Paper can bruise a life," he answered. Between scans, Daniel read a paragraph on durability and another on calibrating with common salt so clinics could avoid proprietary kits. He felt dread and hope rise together, 2 tides pressing from opposite shores. "If this moves forward," he said, "people will ask why we changed course." Rosa lifted a shoulder. "Tell them you listened," she said. He carried that sentence into the drizzle and across a crosswalk where a child in a yellow coat stomped a puddle and laughed. In the car, his phone lit with 3 messages about consolidation and a calendar invite to finalize cuts. He deleted the invite, then rebuilt it as a working session titled Access Strategy. At home, he tucked Lily into bed and told her the journal was extraordinary. She yawned and said, "Make them see." He sent the scans to a trusted engineer and a professor at OHSU with a request for a brutal read by morning. Then he drafted a letter to the board that did not ask permission so much as declare intent, protect the rare disease work, invest in the cartridge line, and offset the spend by shrinking vanity projects. He closed the laptop and watched the city soften under fresh rain. A freight horn stitched neighborhoods together with its low call. He could feel the old map in his pocket, a compass he had not known he needed until a boy knocked and said, "Can I join you?" The choice ahead would cost favors and comfort. It would also buy a kind of peace he had not tasted since the night before the crash, when life sounded louder than money. He turned off the lamp, let dark gather, and decided to carry the journals, logic into the next meeting and see who flinched first. The morning Daniel Harper chose to force the question. Portland wore rain like armor. Steel Bridge lifted its black ribs from the Willamette, while gulls tilted through low cloud, and streetcars hissed along tracks that shone like wet wire. In the back seat of a sedan drifting past Powell's books, he reviewed the deck again, Rosa's husband's sketches modeled into prototypes. cost curves flattened by thrift, a pilot design that bent glamour toward service. He thought of Lily, asleep after a long night, the star stickers still glowing faintly on her ceiling, and of Mateo's careful voice promising he would be there even if meetings ran late. The sedan turned toward the tower, wipers ticking like quiet metronomes. Daniel touched the pocket containing a small photocopy of a page that had changed his vision. A drawing labeled "Make Simple, Reliable, Make Reliable, Affordable." It felt like a vow. In the elevator, he watched rain smear the city into charcoal bands and steadied his breath as floors blinked upward. Outside the boardroom, assistants parked umbrellas like spears beside the wall. Inside, the table waited under recessed lights, a runway for arguments. Marla Kincaid, from finance, reviewed a sheet at the far end. Victor Lang folded his arms with theatrical patience. Two members whispered about guidance. Daniel set his laptop, let the room settle, and began. He spoke without theatrics. He showed the cartridge that could run panels with capillary flow, the hand-powered centrifuge that shrugged at outages, and the calibration method using common salt instead of proprietary kits. He mapped a path, partnered with a university lab, validate in an independent clinic, deploy mobile units across counties that had been treated as afterthoughts. Then he named costs and offsets with the accuracy his critics claimed to love. Marketing. Events would shrink, vanity booths would die, funds would move to the bench and the field. He ended with a photograph of Rose's husband in work clothes, smiling shyly beside a table of improvised jigs. Silence followed, the kind that nods before it bites. Marla tapped her pen. Admirable charity, she said, but the quarter needs certainty. Not folk hero tinkering. Victor leaned forward, voice smooth and cold. If you redirect capital now, we will miss the acquisition window. We will bleed share, and competitors will frame us as naive. You know how this city applauds stories and punishes softness. Daniel felt old instincts reach for compromise. He refused them. The company's purpose is not quarterly applause, he said. Our edge will be trust, durability, and access. We can win a decade by serving people others price out. The chair cleared his throat. You ask us to gamble margin and momentum on drawings from a janitor. Daniel kept his gaze steady, on designs from a technician whose title hid his genius, on data that holds under heat and noise, on a pilot with a hospital ready to measure outcomes without marketing fog. He clicked on a letter from the network's chief of medicine, conservative and firm. The letter did not sing. It simply committed. Marla pressed again. And the rare disease program you refuse to cut. Keep burning cash while you test philanthropy. Pitched as a strategy, he answered with math, trimmed elsewhere, and a milestone plan. He named review dates and exit ramps to calm reflex panic. The room still bristled. Daniel ended the slide deck and let rain fill the silence with a faint drum. We can be the company that ships answers when power fails, he said, or the company that decorates conferences while clinics apologize. Choose. The chair proposed a recess. Daniel stepped into the corridor to breathe against cool glass. Down on the waterfront, the esplanade ran slick and empty. Trees rinsed clean. River muscling past pilings like a patient animal. He rubbed the copy in his pocket and remembered the night he promised Lily he would never confuse noise with meaning again. Across town, in a living room, scented with tea and paper, Matteo set colored scraps in a circle while Lily supervised from her chair. They were building a new star map from recycling, covering it with tape so it could survive a window breeze. She tried to act steady, yet words thinned. What if Dad forgets this when the board shouts? Matteo kept cutting, voice gentle. When he shouts back for something good, it means he remembers why he wakes. She smiled, almost, then frowned. What if they take his job? Matteo weighed the scissors in his palm, as if they were a choice. Then you and I point to the sky and wait until the clouds obey. People who love you don't vanish because a door closes. He glanced at the unfinished circle. Also, I promised Rosa we would teach you the constellation she invented when the power went out and nurses used flashlights. Lily's eyes brightened. Name it, he grinned. The stubborn lantern. She laughed, and the map moved closer to completion. He added softly, what would you risk for what's right? The questions slid between them like a shared lantern and settled without pressure. At Powell's that afternoon, Daniel bought a notebook with thick paper, paid in cash, then stood at the top of the orange stairs, listening to the hum that always floats there, the sound of people searching. He wrote 3 lines: honor the source, defend the promise, expect the storm. When the meeting resumed, the storm arrived. Victor called the plan sentimental branding. Marla displayed a graph that piqued curiosity. Another member warned of credit downgrades and activist campaigns. Daniel let each portrait of fear stand, then worked through them with the steadiness of a builder checking joists. He cited failure, modes, and contingency stock. He passed around lab notes showing robustness under vibration, dust, and cold. He introduced the ethics officer, who described a licensing model that would set royalties low, tie them to volume, and fund a community grant bearing Rosa's family name. He closed with a commitment to publish validation data, open methods that did not endanger competitive claims, and report failures with the same clarity as wins. Some faces softened, others hardened like winter mud. The chair requested a pulse. Numbers looked thin. Daniel felt the drop and chose not to flinch. Then he did something that frightened him more than resignation letters. He told them the real story. He told them about a boy who knocked on his door during rain, about Lily finding a triangle in a bruised sky when hope seemed exhausted, about a journal kept alive by a woman who refused to let ingenuity rot in a carton. He did not perform grief. He named it and left it on the table. The room quieted in the way theaters quiet when someone forgets they are acting. The chair exhaled. You could still lose your job. Daniel nodded. Then someone worthy should take it and keep this course. The pulse shifted a fraction. Not enough. The vote date set for 2 days later would decide. He walked out into the rain, feeling strangely unburdened. On the waterfront, the river kept its muscle, bridges holding still like patient elders, while bikes whispered. He called Lily. She told him the stubborn lantern had found a place near her window. He felt tears strike and vanish in the weather. Tell Matteo I carry his family's light, he said. I already did, she answered. He ducked under an awning, watched drop speed and run, and pictured Rosa's husband at a metal table, fiddling a hinge until it behaved. The city felt different, as if it were testing him with beauty to see if he would remember what he had sworn. Rain slackened, trees shook themselves like dogs. He walked back toward the tower, ready for the vote he might lose, ready for the work he would not abandon, ready to honor a legacy that had asked for nothing and offered a way forward for everyone who lives between storms and need. Rain dragged veils across the city while elevators lifted Daniel Harper toward a room shaped like a verdict. The river pressed beneath the bridges, streetcars hissed along rails, and clouds leaned low against the tower's glass. The board assembled, early jackets slung over chairs, legal pads open like thin shields. Marla Kincaid traced a bar chart. Victor Lang balanced a capped pen like a switch. The chair invited statements for the record, and the room fell silent. Daniel set his laptop down, palmed a photocopied page from Rosa Cruz's husband's journal, and felt its soft edge steady his pulse. He began without preface, the capillary cartridge that ran panels without pumps, the hand-powered centrifuge born from a bicycle rim, the salt-based calibration that ignored proprietary kits, the pilot agreement ready at a cautious hospital, and the offsets that would kill vanity booths to fund what mattered. He kept his voice even and let the slides carry the scaffolding. Costs, timelines, failure modes, contingency stock, third-party replication. Marla went first. Our guidance cannot survive a detour into compassionate experiments, she said, sliding a printout across the table. Cut the rare disease program, shelve this cartridge fantasy, and secure the acquisition window. Victor leaned back. Competition doesn't pause for poetry. If we chase a thrift myth, we will be remembered as the firm that confused charity with strategy. Daniel breathed once, saw Lily's ceiling sprinkled with glow stars, heard Mateo counting seconds between thunder and flash, and chose his ground. This isn't charity, he said. This is reliability scaled to reality. When power fails, clinics still need answers. Trust becomes a moat. Access becomes growth. He clicked on letters from engineers and a cautious chief of medicine. The chair laced his fingers, and the burn, covered by trimming spectacle and delaying non-essential hires. Review gates every 6 weeks, exit ramps if field data disagrees. Victor's smile stayed thin. You are wagering brand strength on a janitor's sketches. Daniel touched the page in his pocket. On a technician whose title masked his gifts, whose designs met cost and accuracy in rooms with failing outlets and tired nurses. As debate tightened, his mind flashed to a night Rosa described, her husband buffing floors after midnight, stopping to sketch a valve because a pump had died during a storm, hands cracked from bleach, pencil dull, patient charts piled near a door, a supervisor laughing at the bicycle rim he carried in a tote, the man walking home through rain to a kitchen lit by a single bulb, cutting salt packets to test calibration with a child's plastic cup, logging failures in neat script while buses sighed along the curb and a neighbor's radio whispered late baseball. Daniel set those images beside this room's leather chairs and glass carafes and felt a cliff rise in him, backlit like the gorge at twilight when basalt stands against weather and refuses to move. You think this is romance, he said, but it is engineering that refuses an expensive excuse. Marla exhaled. The street does not price refusal. The street prices certainly so offer certainty, Daniel answered. Certainty that we will tell the truth even when a panel fails. We are certain that we will serve counties that our competitors treat as an afterthought. Certainty that our devices will keep running in vans, school gyms, and blown fuses. The chair leaned forward. Would you stake your role on this? Daniel did not hesitate. I already have. Across town, Lily watched a muted news feed with Mateo on the couch, the room dim, the new star map taped above the window. Her fingers worried the armrest. What if they vote no and send him home with a box? Mateo set a paper airplane on her palm. Then he brings the box here, and we build again. He promised to honor your family, Lily said. He won't bend. He'll bend where wind needs, not where pressure wants, Mateo said, glancing at his phone. In the boardroom, Victor clicked his pen at last. Let me be explicit. We replace the chief executive, secure the acquisition, and stabilize guidance. Or we indulge a narrative and invite activists to feast on us. Daniel kept his seat. Replace me if you must. But before you vote to bury this, visit a mobile unit when the generator coughs and a mother is counting minutes. Watch a nurse. Switch to a hand crank and keep a centrifuge spinning because the design bowed to common sense. Watch a simple cartridge ignore vibration on a gravel road. Then tell me margin is king. Marla's jaw tightened. Anecdotes. Replicated in 3 clinics, Daniel said, sliding reports forward. Statistically clean. Ready for a wider field. The chair studied him. You sound like a man on a ledge. Daniel pictured Crown Point in wind that tears at jackets. The Columbia spread like hammered pewter, mist rising from waterfalls that never stop falling. Some ledges are vistas, he said. You climb to see the line you must take. He turned the photocopied page over so they could read the penciled note. Make simple, reliable, make reliable, affordable. Silence reached the windows. He finished. Softly, a boy knocked on my door during the rain and taught me how to purpose walk. I will not teach him that money can erase what is right. Victor stood. Enough pilgrim rhetoric. Enough fear, Daniel replied. Let's vote. Marla spoke of downgrades and coverage. A newer director warned about cash covenants. A senior scientist, long quiet, described nights in a rural van, coaxing sputtering devices back to life, and how a cartridge that respects physics over packaging could save entire weeks of care. Momentum wobbled. Daniel looked at the door as if Lily and Mateo were standing just beyond it. He imagined Lily whispering constellations through clenched teeth and Mateo guiding her breath when pain came sideways. Resolve settled like basalt. Whatever follows, he said, I will keep this course, title or no. Marla sat back, expression unreadable. Victor checked his watch as if time itself owed him interest. The chair lifted a palm. One more question, Mr. Harper. If the field data fails, do you kill the line? Yes, Daniel said. We publish the failure and pivot. Integrity is not theater. A murmur ran along the table. Lily texted a single star emoji to Daniel's phone. In his pocket, it pulsed against his leg like a metronome for nerve. We are not a showroom, he said. We are a workshop. The chair reached for the ballot folder, while a clock in Daniel's head revisited the kitchen Rosa had described. A man with bleach cracks on his hands, breaking salt packets, tapping a plastic cup, listening for a faint click that meant the world could still be measured, and writing it down so some stranger might not have to guess. He thought of Lily's map and Mateo's paper airplane and the sentence on the journal's page like a prayer without theater. The chair uncapped a pen. "We proceed to vote," he said, voice cool as the river. Cards slid from envelopes, hands hovered. Daniel did not blink. Ballots slid from envelopes, and the boardroom held its breath. Cards crossed the table toward the chair, edges damp from nervous hands. Daniel watched the river beyond the glass, a tugboat shouldering rain across pewter water, and waited for the count. Motion carries. One vote. Not Aurora Shiver. Dr. Aisha Qureshi, invited that morning. Sleeves rolled and hair damp from the waterfront, tapped a folder. "For the record," she said, "the cartridge met tolerance under vibration, cold, and dust. Salt calibration matched controls. I certify readiness for a controlled field." Her steady voice did more than the tally. Marla looked away. Victor watched the weather as if it could vote. Pressure left Daniel's chest like steam from a kettle. A corridor wide as courage. He signed the resolution, thanked the directors, and promised weekly reports with the same clarity he used for risk. When the room emptied, he set his palm on cool glass. Bridges were graphite. The Willamette pressed forward without ceremony. "Move," the river seemed to say, and he obeyed. He returned to the floor and moved pieces. Marketing shrank. Theatrics ended. Ayesha built a cross-unit team bench, engineers beside nurses who knew how vans rattle when roads turn to gravel. Contracts with the hospital network were cleared by the legal team faster than expected. Daniel instituted weekly open calls where failures received equal time with wins. "If something breaks," he said, "we fix it in daylight." He named the pilot the cruise initiative and asked Rosa to place her husband's photo beside the prototype. She sent a modest portrait, work shirt, shy smile, hands nicked by bleach. A plaque beneath it read, "Make simple, reliable, make reliable, affordable." Visitors stopped mid-stride. Daniel moved his office to a glass room by the lab. The carpet smell gave way to ethanol, coffee, and solder at home. Lily heard the outcome from Mateo, who read Daniel's text and threw both fists upward. She grinned until her cheeks hurt, then hid her face and let relief run through. After dinner, she wanted a celebration that matched their lives, not their square footage. They packed Coco a blanket and 2 lanterns taped with recycled constellations. Forest Park waited with its cathedral hush, ferns cupped around secrets, cedar breath in the damp. The sky darkened after a pause. Mateo led a path where roots wouldn't catch wheels. They moved slowly, laughing when the blanket tried to fly. A clearing opened, rimmed with sword fern and nurse logs lit with moss. They settled, sipped chocolate, and traced a line from Vega to Deneb to Altair. A satellite crossed like a courier. In the hush that followed, a question arrived. How can you inspire change in your world? It didn't crash the moment. It joined it like another faint star. They didn't discuss the board first. They traced Orion's belt, argued gently over the Pleiades, then watched the Milky Way brush the canopy. A jet stitched a white seam that vanished into the dark. Mateo taught Lily a trick Rosa loved. Spot a satellite, count to 10, then close your eyes and name someone who taught you courage. Lily whispered Rosa's name, then Mateo's. Daniel said his late wife's, then added Aisha. The pause felt earned. Owls called deeper in the trees. Water ticked somewhere unseen. One lantern kindled and sat like a domesticated moon. The other refused, then yielded with a soft bloom. Lily held it by her knees, warming a story before telling it. Daniel watched her take up space, less apology, more presence. Above them, a rip in the cloud widened, revealing a scatter of stars, like a promise kept. The following days moved like a river, finding a new channel. Aisha's team loaded the first mobile units. Hand crank mounts arrived with improved bushings. Cartridge lots passed inspection with failure rates that made skeptics nod. Daniel walked the dock at dawn, handing out cups and listening more than he spoke. Procurement chose durable plastics over glossy housings. Legal wrote licenses a nurse could read. Finance moved savings from showy venues toward mileage and maintenance. Reports from clinics appeared. A rural gym sent a photo of a cartridge running after a generator hiccup, time-stamped beside folding chairs. A doctor noted fewer repeat visits because results were ready the first time. A school health lead described a van at an evening event, quietly testing families. Daniel pinned each message on a corkboard and told communications to share progress without polish. Trust, like a trail, grows under footsteps, not fireworks. On a Saturday, with the pilot humming and Lily steady after therapy, they returned to Forest Park to watch stars. Rosa arrived in a bright scarf, leaning on a cane, pride behind gentleness. Mateo brought a paper scope so Lily could aim without strain. Aisha came with pastries that vanished quickly. Dusk diluted greens into ink, resin-scented air. They walked until the trees opened. Lanterns took modest places. Rosa told a story about nights at the clinic when power failed and nurses became quiet heroes. Aisha described early validation, failures that taught more than wins. Daniel listened, grateful for language that honored effort without romance. He turned to Rosa. "The program carries your family's name," he said. "Make sure it deserves it," she answered. Lily raised her cup. Mateo toasted rain. Afterward, Daniel drove them home across bridges, doubling their lights in the water. Sleep took Lily before the last span. Mateo nodded off, smiling. Rosa hummed a nursing tune from Storm Nights. Daniel kept both hands on the wheel and let the river slide under steel as steady as breath. Purpose did not deliver fireworks. It delivered rhythm, and he matched it mile by mile. Monday arrived, rinsed and alert. Harper Biotech posted a plain report. Early outcomes, error bars, logistics snags, and next gates. Analysts grumbled, then, seeing fewer euphemisms, withheld judgment. A trade journal ran a short piece on rural deployments. Community groups sent invitations without velvet ropes. Daniel accepted 2 and declined the rest, reminding everyone that the work would be measured by answers where power fails. He ended the week in the boardroom with lights low and rain needling glass, thanking directors for choosing a more challenging road. Marla offered a quick smile. Victor said little, then admitted privately that field numbers were complex to argue. With Daniel returned to the lab-side office, touched the photo of Rosa's husband, and thought of the tugboat pushing through the weather. The path no longer felt narrow, it felt earned. That night, the city granted one more clearing. Daniel wheeled Lily onto the terrace and killed the porch lights. A thin band of the Milky Way arced above cedar tops, a soft bridge between hills. He thought about the vote's narrow margin and the work it opened, about a boy's knock, a grandmother's journal, a scientist's yes, and a company relearning usefulness. The stars didn't flare. They held, which felt better. He squeezed Lily's shoulder. "We keep going," he whispered. She nodded, eyes bright in the dark. Beyond the garden, the city breathed. A train sounded its horn. Somewhere, a dog barked and fell silent. Daniel rested his hands on the chair's grips and let the moment root. Purpose, he realized, is love with a calendar end. He finally had both. Harper Biotech stepped into spring with humility and focus. Not banners, a company that finally sounded like the city outside its windows. The Cruise Initiative launched an affordable medicine line beside the field-ready cartridge platform, written in plain language, with prices anyone could understand and weekly performance notes that admitted both wins and scrapes. Mobile units left before dawn, nurses beside engineers, clipboards laminated against drizzle, a binder fat with procedures large enough to read in rain. Aisha Qureshi posted validation dashboards on Mondays and mistakes on Wednesdays so nobody could pretend the work never wobbled. Clinics texted photographs of folding tables and extension cords, and the first patients who went home with answers the same day. A mother in Tillamook thanked the team after a cartridge ruled out a dangerous infection and saved another wet, anxious drive. Trust grew in slow, useful inches. Revenue climbed more modestly than analysts once demanded, yet surveys called the firm honest, and calls kept coming for reasons that felt clean. Daniel Harper kept his office by the lab glass, sleeves rolled, calendar open to anyone brave enough to bring hard news. He ended meetings by naming the next risk and taking partial responsibility for it, so that fear could be divided into pieces. He carried crates at a weekend clinic in Lentz and laughed when a toddler tried to steal a blue glove like a balloon. When asked why a global company cared about broken outlets and gravel roads, he said, "Reliability is the only advertisement worth paying for." Rosa Cruz brought a shy portrait of her late husband, and the team framed it over a workbench with a small plaque that read, "Make simple, reliable, make reliable, affordable." The photo steadied the room like a compass nailed to a table. Life at home strengthened beside the work. Lily crossed the terrace without flinching at thresholds that once stole her breath, then asked for longer routes through Forest Park, where ferns lifted green hands and robins scratched damp duff. During the Cherry Blossom Festival, she steered through gentle crowds, while Mateo walked beside her with a paper kite patched from grocery bags and string. They paused at a taco circle and felt the drumline in their ribs. At Powell's, they found a used Star Atlas with a library stamp and a crescent coffee stain. Back home, she taped a page above her bed and told the ceiling that clouds were only on loan. Mateo found his future inside the promise that had come to their door. Aisha offered him a paid internship in validation after he helped a field tech fix a misaligned bushing with a binder clip. He accepted with a grin that could have powered a lobby lamp. After school, he rode the streetcar to the lab, learned why cold chains fail, measured vibration inside a van on a broken stretch, and kept notes in block letters so Lily could read them over cocoa. At night, he studied algebra with Rosa, then practiced Python on an old laptop until loops behaved. He told Daniel he wanted devices that listened to the weather. Daniel promised mentorship time, not as a favor, but as a bet on a mind that already delivered more than most executives. Spring kept opening. Bridges breathed as cyclists rattled over steel. Markets returned with rhubarb, tulips, and laughter. On Saturdays, Daniel and Lily rolled past the stalls while Matteo tested fruit with theatrical seriousness, and they ended near the river where a busker's violin threaded the wind and a tug nosed a barge upstream. Lily wore a jacket patched with stars, asked strangers' names with bright confidence, spoke up during therapy when a task hurt, and argued for rest without apology. Her world had grown rooms again. The program matured without stiffening the field. Teams sent lists that read like poems for engineers. Dust sneaks through this seam from the south. Tape peels at 15 degrees. The crank rubs fingers after hour 3. iShow's group answered with swapped materials, gentler grips, and seals that behaved like good manners. Costs held and outcomes improved. An Eastern Oregon clinic used savings for a mobile dental day. A midwife called to say a rapid result guided a crucial decision and let a family sleep. A shelter reported faster treatment during a small outbreak because lines moved and instructions were readable. Each note pinned on Daniel's corkboard drew a thin line between intention and result. Finance posted a plain English pricing explicable so communities could predict bills without dread. Legal simplified licenses and sent a share to a community fund bearing the crew's name. Not everyone cheered. A few analysts warned about missed flash and smaller margins. Daniel listened and pointed to vans where a crank and a cartridge pushed care into dark corners, then asked whether that wasn't a return worth protecting. By summer's lip, letters from abroad turned into visits. Teams from Lagos, Recife, and Cebu walked the lab, ate tacos from carts, rode along rough routes, and traded design tricks that made the devices humbler and tougher. The company opened its documentation archive with translations and asked that adaptations return to the commons after local trials. Competitors grumbled, yet trust rose around the stance like scaffolding that refused to creak. Revenue grew slower than a bragging deck would prefer. Reputation grew exactly fast enough. One evening, after a day that felt short because purpose shortens time, Daniel and Lily met Matteo and Rosa on the waterfront. Lanterns hung from trees for a small festival. Stalls offered fry bread, lemonade, and zines from neighborhood presses, while a choir sang harmonies that made strangers quiet. The Willamette shone like beaten metal in warm light. Lily asked Matteo to push faster, then slower, stop, so she could taste air above the water. They watched a child launch a paper boat and chase it along the edge until it caught a ride in a tiny whirl. Daniel felt an old ache loosen, the part that had kept counting losses when gains stood in front of him, waving when the sun dropped. Behind the hills, stars pricked through thin haze, and the city dimmed enough to show familiar points. Lily found Vega, then Deneb, then Altair, and smiled with certainty that carried past weather. Matteo traced the triangle with his finger and whispered what he would study next fall: instrumentation, materials, code he could trust in the rain. Rosa listened like a lighthouse and corrected a term with a nurse's precision when enthusiasm scrambled it. Daniel pictured the boy wearing a badge that read engineer and felt lighter than the river air. Home changed shape, too. The mansion remembered how to be a house. Meals slid toward simplicity. Laughter replaced the worry that had camped in corners. On the first truly warm morning, petals drifted across the garden like quiet confetti. Lily hosted a tiny party with Mateo and 2 classmates who rearranged schedules to show up. They brought homemade cards and a thrifted astronomy poster with more tape than edge. Daniel grilled peaches while Rosa brewed cinnamon tea. Aisha arrived carrying a broken bushing someone had turned into a keychain. Clouds thinned to nothing. On the terrace, Lily raised her cup and toasted kindness that does not ask for an audience. Daniel answered with a few words about debt he could never repay and work that might, in time, honor it properly. They let the silence after a toast do its job. News traveled in widening circles. A rural paper ran a photograph of a nurse cranking a centrifuge while a child watched with solemn delight. A magazine profiled Rosa and called her a steward of ingenuity. Conference invitations came, and Daniel sent younger staff instead with one instruction: tell the truth, bring field notes, and skip the metaphors. The board, once brittle, learned to read the weekly dashboards without flinching. Victor admitted privately that numbers from the field were hard to argue with, and that trust had a market of its own. Marla began opening updates by asking which failure taught the most that week, and the room felt healthier for it. The season ripened. Clinics reported fewer return visits and faster starts. Suppliers shipped dependable parts instead of glossy housings. A hospital network signed a 3-year agreement that tied bonuses to access rather than spectacle. Harper Biotech shipped the first medicines under the new pricing policy, and patients posted bills that did not make them shake. None of it felt like a miracle. All of it felt like work worth waking for. The story that began with an empty table had become tables full of tools, maps, and plans drawn on napkins. Daniel felt the ledger inside him balance at last. Grief honored, love practiced, purpose kept. He looked at Lily and saw a leader arriving. He looked at Mateo and saw a scientist with rain on his sleeves and ideas in his pockets. He looked at Rosa and saw a legacy alive and practical. He looked at Aisha and saw rigor married to mercy. Portland glowed steady as bridges doubled their lights in the river and the air carried cedar and yeast. If kindness can lift a company, it can lift a street, a school, a clinic, a city, and a stubborn world, learning to remember its neighbors. Plant a seed of kindness. Today, share this story and inspire others.